Water is vital for all life, and for most plants and animals, rain is the main source of water. When rain falls on urban landscapes though, it is often contaminated with a wide range of pollutants. Oils and petrol from cars and machinery, fertilisers from gardens and lawns, plastic bags, bottles, paper and other rubbish, and detergents used to wash cars. All these pollutants will kill animals and plants and the habitat on which they depend. It is up to us to take care that pollutants do not enter our waterways. The following two films were made when volunteers, keen to keep an eye on the state of their local environment, ventured out to monitor the marine environment. So why don't you get active and call your local council and find out how you can care for your local environment. Seagrasses are vital for a wide range of marine animals as a food source, habitat and breeding ground. But seagrasses are heavily impacted by urban environments through stormwater pollution. Today, local Sea Scouts and community members have joined with marine ecologists to monitor the health of the seagrass meadows at Sugarloaf Bay.
We're doing a survey of seagrasses in Sugarloaf Bay. The original survey was done by Fisheries Department about 3 years ago, and we're going to check to see whether those seagrass beds still exist or whether they've expanded or contracted.
Seagrass is a unique flowering plant that's actually adapted to living underwater. 70 million years ago it was actually thought to have been evolved, and it's come from the land and re-evolved to living in the water.
This is an estuarine environment, and so we have the salt water and we also have the fresh water coming down the creek. And the creek environment is one that's been changed over time. No longer are we getting completely fresh water, but it's being disturbed on the way by human impacts.
Seagrass is important for its habitat qualities. It also provides food for a lot of animals.
It's the physical structure of the seagrass, and that physical structure supplies habitat for all the little guys, the crustacean and the amphipods. And out of that, you sort of get the bream and all the juvenile fish visit to actually have a feed. And so that's where they sort of come into the ecology of everything. Really quite important.
We've just had a look at what patches are between Sugarloaf Bay and the Cub Hole, and we've just found some of the thickest seagrass.
We have found an extra species around in that other place that we weren't expecting to find, so that's pretty good, I suppose.
I think we actually have 2 species of seagrass in this little area, which is pretty exciting because we only thought we had 1.
Lots of it has algae on it from the nutrients in the water.
We're about to get in the water and have a close-up look. Really important for the local community to monitor seagrass because a lot of the changes that are happening to seagrass are happening at the local scale. This gets monitored officially once every 10 years. You do things like going out and having a look for the health of the seagrass, having a look how dense the seagrass beds are, and having a look how intensive the algal epiphytes are on the seagrass blade. Have a look at the actual seagrass blades and see whether they've got anything growing on them.
In this healthy catchment here, the algae isn't so thick on it. Probably got a healthy population of amphipods. If you imagine sort of sheep grazing away at the grass, they take off all the algae and the grass is quite healthy.
This patch here is fantastic. It's a really beautiful patch. And there's heaps of fish down there. There's a lot of bream, and other people have said they've seen tailor, and there's some ascidians and all sorts of things.
Sediment and nutrient are probably the main things that hinder their growth, but after a big rainfall you will get quite a flush of sediment coming out through the drainage pipes, and it tends to smother the seagrass. and that's not the best.
Sediments are what runs off the roads, what runs off the building sites, what runs off homes. So when it rains heavily, the sediments can move into the stormwater moves into the creeks and streams, and the creeks and streams move into the estuaries.
But where you do have a degraded catchment, you definitely see a lot more growth on the blades, and that also cuts down photosynthesis. The less light that gets to the blades, the less healthy our seagrass is.
Where you have a lot of houses in the catchment, you don't actually have huge seagrass beds. They've actually been lost to us.
We're just testing the water for some parameters, things like turbidity. The turbidity does affect the amount of seagrass that can grow, and it's associated with what's coming down the streams. It's generally around 2 to 4. For the seagrass delivered, we have to be less than 8 at all times. The closer to the creek you go, probably the worse it gets, because that's where there's more people and you can have more influence.
We just actually had one dip net then in the water and found a little tiny baby leather jacket and a shrimp.
Have you guys seen the stormwater drains?
Yeah.
Around your place? And usually it's pretty dirty, the water that's going in there.
That seagrass down there is actually in really quite good condition, because when we took the sediment off, what colour was it underneath?
Green.
Yeah, and it didn't take much to remove the sediment. It was just a very thin coating. Whereas in other areas, there's actually really thick algae growing on there, which means that there's a lot of nutrient in the water. So seagrass gives a really good indication of water quality. What seagrass needs to grow is sun, you're quite right. It needs to photosynthesize. It needs salt water, and it needs to have clear water. Seagrass can grow quite deep in the water if the water's really clear. What people can do to help look after our seagrass beds is really look after the catchment and making sure that whatever goes into the catchment is not going to make an impact on the receiving waters.
Washing down your car, doing the lawn, all these things influence the creeks and streams and eventually the coastal environment.
Whatever you do in your house, in the catchment, will end up in the waterway. So be careful about your use of fertiliser, be careful about how often you water. Using native plants is a really good idea, because you don't need to have that extra application of fertilisers. So just being careful in the catchment is one of the really big issues of looking after seagrass down at the other end of the pipeline.
We're training up divers in order to be able to conduct fish identification surveys.
There's not very much information out there on species in the harbour, so all the information we can get is pretty essential.
Harbour Keepers, a volunteer organisation run by the NPA, have come down to Sugarloaf Bay to run a fish survey. This survey will help community and council better understand the health of the receiving waters of the Scotts Creek catchment. The presence or absence of key indicator fish will show how healthy and functional this habitat is.
So by collecting this initial information, it will give something to compare what progress they're making or what problems we're facing. The 50 target species are either a threatened species or they're on there because they're ecological indicators. Let's start looking at fish. Striped catfish. They have a tapering body with an... The adults look quite similar. These are juvenile. They take on a more reddish colour. The eastern hula fish. Yellow, black and red. Silver or white belly. Small black yellowtail kingfish, blue to blackish sort of silver black spot goatfish, using their barbels. Spotted wobbegongs, also known as carpet sharks, and much as he looks like he's fast asleep, they're very strong, powerful creatures. So if you see one, you swim over it, you go, one, write it down, keep on swimming.
Diversity of fishes such as the small plankton-eating hula fish and the larger predators like the rays and surgefish are all indicative of a functional and healthy marine environment. But in a highly urbanised area like Sugarloaf Bay, there are a lot of environmental pressures on the marine environments, so we can't presume that it will be healthy.
We've been through the training seminar. We're now preparing for the dive.
And then the dive master will come down and give us a briefing.
At least I feel like getting in my
Every diver has a dive slate that have the 50 species that they're looking for recorded on them. The divers take a pencil with them, and during the dive they can keep a tally.
The photos really assist to identify the correct fish.
At the end of the dive, we'll all be collating all that information. Hopefully we will find lots of fish, but if we find that none of our target species are here, that is a find in its own right.
We're going to get 2 pairs to go in this direction. 1 straight out the front, pretty much. 1 in the direction of the boat moorings, and 1 sort of inside the boat moorings. Just be careful with the oyster shells and just get out beyond this 1 metre zone and it looks okay.
Your actual survey time is 30 minutes. Get yourselves down on the bottom, give an okay to each other, and then start your watches. Let's have everybody back on the surface. Finish the dive after 40 minutes.
Must have been bream. Yeah. 2 bream. Okay. We're just applying our lessons at the moment.
See, we saw a lot of these hula fish.
Hundreds.
And lots of crap.
A sunken yacht somewhere out there, about 10 metres down.
Probably saw about 12 of the 50, which is pretty good.
We saw a couple of rays and saw quite a few smallish fish. Not too bad. But we saw a lot of rays. We saw about 5 of them. Like at first there wasn't all that many fish, but then we hit jackpot over here and our 30 minutes had already passed. Like there was heaps of hula fishes. Yeah, we saw a lot of rubbish. We found a screwdriver.
Rubbish, sediment and other pollutants all impact on the juvenile and adult fish by fouling their habitat and foraging areas. Stormwater pollution is one of the greatest degrading influences coming from our urban environments.
It was actually really good. We're pleasantly surprised. We've seen lots of our target species, lots of silver bream and eastern hulafish. Even saw a couple of, or rather 1 old wife, which was quite a special thing to see. We also saw a fair few yellow bream with the black tail fin.
Yeah, tannerite.
With the tannerite.
I was thinking, I know there's one of the fish with the black tail fin.
Right at the end we saw a school of probably about 10 or so surgefish, with 3 or 4 of them being of that length.
Quite a few Sydney cardinal fish.
Somebody saying they saw a luderick.
I saw something like that was sort of that similar shape, bluish.
We just need to finish this off by recording what it is that everybody saw today. If you can just fill these in. It's certainly better than I expected when I appraised the site. I think it's quite exciting that there seems to be a good diversity of life down there. There's some pretty healthy looking schools of fish, and there's also some quite unique fish.
We can all help maintain healthy marine environments by controlling what gets washed down the drains by rains. So things like rubbish, toxic chemicals, fertilisers, soils and sediments. Clean waters and healthy habitats mean marine diversity and healthy fish populations.